Imagine standing in the shadow of a towering pyramid, its perfectly aligned stones defying time and weather for thousands of years, or walking through an ancient Roman aqueduct, still carrying water with engineering precision that rivals modern systems. These aren't just relics of the past, they're testaments to the astonishing brilliance of civilizations that thrived long before our digital age. The truth is, we often underestimate just how advanced our ancestors really were. Their innovations weren't just groundbreaking for their time, many of them are still in use today, hidden in plain sight, woven into the fabric of our daily lives. This video isn't just about history, it's about uncovering the living legacy of ancient ingenuity, a legacy that continues to shape our world in ways you might not expect. From the cobblestone streets beneath your feet to the herbal remedies in your medicine cabinet, traces of ancient wisdom are everywhere. Think about it, how many times have you marveled at the durability of a centuries-old building, or wondered how people thousands of years ago could predict astronomical events with pinpoint accuracy? These weren't just lucky guesses or primitive experiments. They were the result of meticulous observation, trial and error, and a deep understanding of the natural world. Knowledge so effective that we've kept it alive across generations, even as technology races forward. So what makes these ancient techniques so enduring? Why have some methods outlasted empires, survived revolutions, and remained relevant in an age of artificial intelligence and space travel? The answer lies in their simplicity, their adaptability, and their sheer brilliance. Over the next 30 examples, we'll journey across continents and centuries, exploring everything from forgotten construction secrets to time-tested medical practices. Some will surprise you, others might make you look at everyday objects in a whole new light. But one thing's for certain, by the end, you'll never see history as a distant, dusty chapter again. It's alive, it's practical, and it's all around us, ready to uncover the hidden threads connecting the past to the present. Let's begin. Take the Pantheon in Rome, a dome so vast it could fit a modern-day sports arena inside, built nearly 2,000 years ago without steel reinforcement, yet still standing perfectly intact. The secret: Roman concrete. While our modern concrete crumbles after a few decades, theirs has weathered earthquakes, wars, and centuries of rain. What did they know that we're only just figuring out? The answer lies in a recipe lost to time, a mix of lime, volcanic ash from the Pozzuoli region, and seawater. When modern scientists analyzed it, they found something astonishing. Instead of eroding, Roman concrete actually gets stronger over time. The volcanic ash reacts with seawater to form rare minerals that seal cracks before they spread. It's a self-healing material, something our own engineers are desperately trying to replicate today. Think about the absurdity here. We've sent rockets to Mars, yet we're still scratching our heads over how an ancient civilization cracked the code for indestructible infrastructure. The Romans didn't have labs or microscopes. They worked by trial and error, observing how different mixtures held up in harbors and aqueducts, the real kicker. We've known about their use of volcanic ash for centuries, but it wasn't until 2023 that researchers finally pinpointed the exact chemical reaction that makes it so resilient. And this isn't just about one dome or a few lucky ruins. Walk through any ancient Roman port city, and you'll find concrete piers still submerged in the ocean, untouched by erosion. Meanwhile, our modern ports require constant repairs. There's a humility in realizing that sometimes progress isn't about inventing something new, it's about rediscovering what we've forgotten. Today, engineers are racing to tweak modern concrete recipes with volcanic ash, hoping to build bridges and seawalls that might last a millennium. Imagine a world where our great-great-grandchildren could stand on the same structures we build today. That's the enduring power of Roman ingenuity, not frozen in history, but waiting to reshape our future. Now let's shift from unbreakable concrete to something far more delicate, yet equally enduring: the fine needles of Chinese acupuncture. Picture this: over 3,000 years ago, long before modern medicine understood the nervous system, healers in ancient China mapped out pathways of energy called meridians, pinpointing precise spots where inserting hair-thin needles could restore balance to the body. What's astonishing isn't just that this practice survived millennia, but that today, in clinics from Beijing to Boston, these same principles are easing chronic pain, reducing stress, and even helping with conditions Western medicine struggles to treat. The brilliance of acupuncture lies in its dual nature. It's both an art and a science. Ancient texts like the Huangdi Nijing, written around 200 BC, describe Qi, the vital energy flowing through meridians, and how blockages cause illness. But here's where it gets fascinating. Modern MRI studies show that inserting needles at these traditional points actually triggers measurable changes in the brain. When a needle touches a spot linked to pain relief, like the hand's Hegu point, scans reveal decreased activity in the pain processing centers. It's as if ancient practitioners somehow knew how to hack the body's wiring without dissection or imaging technology. Skeptics once dismissed acupuncture as placebo, but the evidence keeps stacking up. The World Health Organization recognizes it as effective for over 50 conditions, from migraines to osteoarthritis. Even the US military uses it to treat soldiers with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries. And the secret might lie in something our ancestors couldn't have named: endorphins. Those needles stimulate the release of the body's natural painkillers, along with anti-inflammatory compounds, a biochemical validation of a 3,000-year-old hunch. Yet for all our scientific progress, there's still mystery here. Why do some points, like the one between your thumb and index finger, have such universal effects? How did early healers discover that stimulating a spot near your pinky toe could influence pelvic health? It's a reminder that some wisdom transcends tools or technology. In an age of robotic surgery and gene therapy, the humble acupuncture needle endures not as a relic, but as a testament to the enduring power of observing the human body in harmony with nature. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing of all. Sometimes the oldest solutions are the ones still writing the future of medicine. Consider the striking images of ancient Egyptian royalty, their eyes dramatically lined with dark kohl, a look so iconic it still inspires modern fashion. But those bold cosmetic strokes were far more than decoration. The Egyptians weren't just mastering beauty, they were pioneers of practical science, blending artistry with medicine and spirituality in ways we're still unraveling. Their signature eyeliner, made from grinding minerals like galena and blending them with fats or oils, wasn't just about allure. It was a shield against the harsh desert sun, a barrier against infections, and even a spiritual armor believed to ward off evil spirits. What's remarkable is how their formula holds up under modern scrutiny. Researchers analyzing ancient coal pots found traces of lead salts, something that would sound alarm bells today. But here's the twist. Unlike the toxic effects we associate with lead, these compounds, when finally processed and applied in tiny amounts, actually stimulated the immune system. They produced nitric oxide, a molecule that fights bacteria, effectively preventing eye infections in a land where the Nile's floods brought both life and waterborne pathogens. It's as if the Egyptians accidentally stumbled into immunotherapy centuries before the term existed. Fast forward to today, and you'll find echoes of their wisdom in pharmacy aisles and makeup bags. The same smudged kohl look you see on fashion runways. Many modern eyeliners still use mineral-based formulas inspired by ancient techniques, though without the lead. And the medicinal angle hasn't disappeared either. Some ophthalmologists even recommend specific mineral-based liners for patients with sensitive eyes, acknowledging their gentle antibacterial properties. But the real magic lies in how the Egyptians thought holistically. They didn't separate beauty from health or spirituality. Applying kohl was a ritual and act of honoring the gods Ra and Horus, who were depicted with divine, lined eyes. The makeup palette itself was sacred, often buried with its owner for use in the afterlife. In a world where we compartmentalize cosmetics, medicine, and religion, their approach feels almost revolutionary. And perhaps that's the lesson hidden in those ancient cosmetic jars. Innovation isn't always about creating something new. Sometimes it's about recognizing the genius in what already exists. Today's scientists are revisiting these millennia-old recipes, not as historical curiosities, but as potential blueprints for new antimicrobial treatments. Who knew the key to cutting-edge medicine might be hiding in the makeup kit of a pharaoh? Picture a Byzantine warship in the 7th century, surrounded by enemy vessels closing in for the kill. Suddenly, a jet of liquid fire erupts from the ship's prow, flames that cling to everything they touch, burning even on water, defying all attempts to extinguish them. This was Greek fire, the ancient world's most feared weapon, a technological marvel so devastating it kept the Byzantine Empire safe for centuries. The recipe was a state secret, guarded so fiercely that its exact formula died with the emperors who controlled it. Yet, centuries later, we're still piecing together clues about this terrifying substance and discovering that its shadow looms large in today's warfare. What made Greek fire so unstoppable? Contemporary accounts describe a sticky, napalm-like liquid launched from bronze tubes or siphons, igniting on contact and creating infernos that couldn't be doused with water. Some reports even claim pouring water intensified the flames. Historians and chemists have spent decades theorizing its composition. The leading suspect, a volatile mix of quicklime, pine resin, and petroleum, possibly enhanced with sulfur or saltpeter. Quicklime reacts violently with water, generating enough heat to ignite the mixture mid-air, while pine resin made it adhere to ships and flesh alike. But the true genius lay in its delivery system. Byzantine engineers crafted pressurized nozzles, possibly using early pumps or bellows, allowing them to spray fire in continuous streams, an innovation that wouldn't be matched until the 20th century. The psychological impact was as potent as the flames. Enemy sailors, already superstitious about the sea, faced a weapon that seemed supernatural. Byzantine naval manuals described deliberate tactics to maximize terror, firing Greek fire at night so the eerie glow paralyzed foes with dread. Its mere reputation often deterred attacks, making it one of history's earliest examples of psychological warfare. Fast forward to modern battlefields, and you'll see Greek fire's legacy alive in flamethrowers and incendiary bombs. World War II's flamethrowers operated on eerily similar principles, projecting ignited fuel in a deadly arc. Even today's thermobaric weapons, which create vacuum-like explosions, owe a conceptual debt to those Byzantine chemists. But here's the haunting question. If we've reinvented their destructive power, why did we lose their restraint? The Byzantines reserved Greek fire for existential threats, aware of its horrifying potential. In an age of napalm and white phosphorus, that ethical line feels blurred. Perhaps the greatest mystery isn't the recipe, but how a civilization 12 centuries ago mastered a weapon so advanced, its core principles still ignite both fascination and fear. Greek fire wasn't just a tool of war, it was a warning, a reminder that once fire escapes the bottle, it's hard to tame. And in that lesson, the echoes of ancient Constantinople feel uncomfortably close to home. Now imagine a scorching sun overhead, cracking dry earth where nothing should grow, yet fields of barley and wheat stretch as far as the eye can see. This wasn't a miracle, it was Mesopotamian engineering. 5,000 years ago, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, farmers faced a paradox: fertile soil but unpredictable floods and blistering droughts. Their solution, the world's first large-scale irrigation systems, a network of canals and ditches so sophisticated it turned desert into breadbasket, and laid the foundation for agriculture as we know it. The real stroke of genius wasn't just digging trenches. Mesopotamians mapped entire watersheds, designing canals with precise slopes to control water flow without erosion. They built Weir's early dams to divert floodwaters during spring melts and storage basins to hoard precious reserves for summer droughts. Some canals stretched over 50 miles, all dug by hand with copper tools and organized labor. Think about that level of coordination in a world without satellites or topographic surveys. They even appointed water overseers, officials who allocated irrigation rights, essentially inventing water management bureaucracy millennia before modern governments grappled with the same issues. Fast forward to today, and you'll spot their legacy in California's Central Valley or Israel's Negev Desert, where drip irrigation feeds crops in near-identical climates. Modern farmers still wrestle with the same core challenge: how to grow food where nature resists. While we've swapped copper tools for GPS-guided trenches, the principles remain unchanged. Even our vocabulary nods to antiquity. Irrigation itself comes from the Latin irrigare, but the concept was born in Mesopotamian mud bricks. But here's the twist: ancient techniques are staging a comeback. In Peru's Andes, archaeologists rediscovered pre-Incan, waru raised fields flanked by water channels that regulated soil temperature and prevented frost. Dutch engineers now adapt similar designs for climate-resilient farming. Meanwhile, Iraq's marsh Arabs, descendants of the Mesopotamians, still maintain their ancestors' reed-based water filters, a low-tech solution outperforming some modern purification systems. Yet the most profound lesson isn't in the canals, but in their cautionary tale. Mesopotamia's decline. Historians trace it partly to over-irrigation. Salinization from evaporated water left fields barren. Today, from Arizona to Punjab, we're repeating the same mistake with depleted aquifers and poisoned soils. The difference: we have their example screaming across 5,000 years. Maybe progress isn't just about building better systems, but remembering why others fell. Deep in the steamy jungles of Mesoamerica, the Maya didn't just consume chocolate, they worshipped it. Picture this: a sacred ceremony where rulers sipped frothy, spiced cocoa from ornate vessels, believing the bittersweet brew connected them to the gods. But what's truly mind-blowing isn't just how they revered chocolate, it's that their exact methods for processing cacao beans, perfected over 1,000 years ago, are still the gold standard for artisan chocolatiers today. The magic began with fermentation. After harvesting cacao pods, Mayan farmers piled the sticky white pulp-covered beans into wooden boxes or wrapped them in banana leaves, letting natural yeasts work their alchemy. This wasn't random spoilage, it was a precise science. Over days, heat and microbes broke down the pulp, triggering chemical reactions that developed chocolate's complex flavors. Skip this step and you're left with bland, acidic beans. Modern labs have confirmed what Mayan tradition knew instinctively. Fermentation generates over 600 flavor compounds, from fruity esters to deep, roasted notes. Even now, luxury chocolate makers from Osaka to Belgium replicate this exact process because no machine can outperform centuries-old microbial artistry. Then came the grinding. The Maya used stone metatest curved volcanic slabs to crush roasted beans into a thick paste, sometimes adding chili, vanilla, or wild honey. That slow, friction-heavy process did more than mix ingredients. It released cocoa butter, creating a velvety texture impossible to achieve with industrial rollers. Today's small batch producers still swear by stone grinders, claiming metal machinery oxidizes flavors. There's a reason a single bite of traditionally made chocolate can taste earthy, floral, and fruity all at once. It's a direct echo of those ancient stone-ground batches. But here's the twist: while we've inherited their techniques, we've lost some of their wisdom. The Maya drank chocolate as a bitter, savory elixir, often blended with maize or annatto for depth. Modern candy bars packed with sugar and milk powder would have baffled them. Yet in corners of Guatemala and Mexico, descendants of the Maya still prepare chocolha, the original spiced drink, using recipes etched into generations of memory. And the legacy goes deeper than taste. Cacao was so valuable to the Maya that beans became currency. 10 could buy a rabbit, 100 a slave. Wars were fought over cacao groves. They even depicted the cacao god on temples, offering him beans in rituals. In a way, nothing's changed. Chocolate still holds power over us, still drives economies. Only today, it's a global obsession worth billions. The next time you unwrap a bar, remember, you're not just eating candy. You're tasting a sacred history, one that began with Mayan hands turning bitter seeds into liquid gold. Picture this, a Viking longship battling North Atlantic fog so thick the horizon vanishes, yet the navigator remains unshaken, holding a translucent crystal to the sky. This wasn't magic, it was cutting-edge technology. Viking sunstones, often made of calcite or cordierite, were the secret weapon behind Europe's most feared explorers sailing thousands of miles without compasses. These unassuming crystals could pinpoint the sun's location even through dense cloud cover, guiding ships from Norway to Newfoundland with eerie precision. Here's how it worked. When you tilt a calcite crystal, it exhibits a property called birefringence, splitting light into two beams. By rotating the stone until these beams match in brightness, a navigator could determine the sun's position relative to the horizon, even when the actual orb was completely obscured. It's like having a built-in GPS in your pocket, powered by nothing more than polarized light and centuries of observational genius. Archaeologists found one such crystal aboard a 16th-century shipwreck, perfectly preserved and still functional, proof this wasn't just legend. Modern science has put these sunstones to the test with jaw-dropping results. In a 2013 experiment, researchers had volunteers navigate cloudy skies using replicas. The accuracy, within 5 degrees of the sun's actual position, good enough to sail from Scandinavia to North America without modern instruments. Even today, the Danish Navy experiments with sunstones as emergency backup navigation, acknowledging their reliability when electronics fail. But here's what's truly wild. The Vikings likely weren't the first to use this trick. Some scholars believe Middle Eastern traders employed similar crystals centuries earlier. Yet it was the Norse who perfected the method, combining it with an intimate knowledge of wave patterns, bird migrations, and star paths, an entire navigation ecosystem lost to most of Europe during the Dark Ages. The real kicker, we're still uncovering their secrets. Recent studies suggest certain Icelandic spar crystals, when used at dawn or dusk, could also help determine latitude. Imagine the implications. A civilization we often stereotype as raiders and berserkers had mastered optics and celestial mechanics, while others still feared the edge of the world. And maybe that's the lesson buried in these sunstones. Innovation isn't always about creating something new. Sometimes it's about seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. A simple crystal, once dismissed as folklore, is now teaching us how to navigate when modern tech falters. The next time you glance at a cloudy sky, remember, the Vikings didn't just endure the unknown. They decoded it with a rock and relentless curiosity. Imagine waking at dawn, sipping warm water infused with ginger to ignite digestion, then moving through a series of stretches synced to your breath, not as trendy self-care but as prescribed daily ritual. This is Ayurveda, India's 5,000-year-old science of life, far more than just herbal teas and yoga poses. It's a complete philosophy where health isn't merely the absence of disease, but a dynamic balance between body, mind, and environment. What's astonishing isn't just its longevity, but how modern science increasingly validates what Ayurvedic sages documented millennia ago without microscopes or clinical trials. Take turmeric, that golden spice now ubiquitous on supermarket shelves. Ancient texts like the Charaka Samhita detailed its use for inflammation, and wound healing over 2,000 years before Western researchers isolated curcumin and confirmed its antioxidant properties. Or consider ashwagandha, an adaptogenic herb Ayurveda prescribed for stress relief. Modern studies show it lowers cortisol levels as effectively as some pharmaceuticals without the side effects. Even the concept of gut health, a 21st century wellness obsession, was central to Ayurveda's focus on Agni, digestive fire, and its links to immunity and mental clarity. But Ayurveda's brilliance lies in its customization. Unlike one-size-fits-all medicine, practitioners assess each person's unique constitution, doshas they called them, earthy kapha, fiery pitta, airy vata. A remedy for insomnia might be warm milk with nutmeg for one person, cooling coconut water for another. This personalized approach feels strikingly modern in an era of precision medicine and DNA-based diets. Then there's yoga. In the West, we've distilled it into fitness routines, but its roots are deeply Ayurvedic, originally designed to balance energy channels and purify the body for meditation. Specific poses were tailored to counteract dosha imbalances, cooling forward bends for overheated pitta types, energizing back bends for sluggish kapha. Even the timing mattered. Ancient texts recommended sunrise practice not just for tranquility, but because the angle of sunlight optimizes vitamin D synthesis and regulates circadian rhythms, a nuance we're only now appreciating. Critics dismissed Ayurveda as folklore until technology caught up. MRI scans show meditation, another Ayurvedic pillar, physically alters brain structures linked to stress. Chromatography proves the synergistic effects of herbal blends like Triphala, where combined plants work better than isolated compounds, something Ayurveda knew long before entourage effect entered scientific jargon. Yet perhaps the most profound lesson Ayurveda offers isn't in its remedies, but in its philosophy. Health isn't a quick fix, it's a daily dialogue with nature's rhythms. Modern functional medicine now echoes this, urging us to see chronic illness as systemic imbalance rather than isolated symptoms. From Silicon Valley, biohackers tracking their microbiome to hospitals integrating yoga for cardiac rehab, the ancient and cutting edge are converging. Ayurveda endures not because it's old, but because it works. In a world drowning in pharmaceuticals and quick fixes, its slow, holistic wisdom feels revolutionary. 5,000 years later, we're finally learning what the sages knew. True healing begins when we stop fighting the body and start listening to it. Walk into any traditional Japanese temple or tea house, and you'll find wooden beams woven together like an intricate three-dimensional puzzle. No nails, no glue, just precision-cut notches and interlocking joints that have held firm through centuries of earthquakes and typhoons. This is the art of Japanese joinery, where wood isn't just fastened, it's conversing. Each joint has a name, a purpose, and often a hidden beauty, like the Shihu Kamatsugi, a four-way interlock resembling flower petals, or the Kanawatsugi, a dovetail so tight it repels water. The result, structures that flex with tremors instead of cracking, and timbers that age gracefully because metal nails haven't rusted or split them apart. What's astonishing isn't just the craftsmanship, it's the philosophy. Japanese carpenters, or miyadeku, treat wood as a living material. They study grain patterns like surgeons reading anatomy, cutting joints to follow the wood's natural strength. A master might spend years learning to hand-carve a single kigumi joint so precisely that it snaps into place with a satisfying kachai, a sound so iconic it's woven into folk songs. This isn't nostalgia, it's engineering. When the 700-year-old Horyuji temple survived a magnitude 7.4 earthquake with barely a creak, modern architects rushed to study its joinery. They found joints designed to dissipate seismic energy, swaying like bamboo rather than resisting like concrete. Today, from Tokyo skyscrapers to Vancouver eco-homes, designers are ditching steel brackets for ancient solutions. The okuriri joint, once used in feudal castles, now appears in earthquake-resistant schools. The Akake technique, which uses wedge tension to create self-tightening joints, inspires sustainable furniture that can be disassembled and reused. Even NASA has taken notes. Wood's vibration absorption and thermal stability make traditional joinery ideal for space habitats. But here's the twist: while we marvel at the technical genius, we often miss the cultural heartbeat. In Japan, sukiya carpentry isn't just construction, it's a meditation. Apprentice carpenters spend mornings sweeping workspaces not for cleanliness, but to attune their hands to subtle textures. Joints are left slightly visible as a mark of honesty. No filler, no fakery. Perhaps that's why a 17th century Kyoto tea house feels more alive than any sterile glass tower. The wood breathes, shifts, tells its story. In a world drowning in disposable fast fashion buildings, Japanese joinery whispers a radical idea. What if we built things to last? Not just physically, but spiritually. When a joint is carved with such care that it outlives generations, it becomes more than a connection. It's a covenant between humanity and nature. And that's a blueprint worth preserving. Step into the blistering deserts of Iran, where summer temperatures soar past 120 degrees, and you'll spot towering structures rising from the rooftops like skeletal sentinels. These aren't monuments or minarets, they're badgers, ancient Persian wind catchers, masterpieces of passive cooling so effective they've kept buildings comfortable for millennia without a single watt of electricity. In cities like Yazd, where the air shimmers with heat, these architectural lungs still breathe life into homes, bazaars, and ice houses, proving that sustainable design isn't a modern trend, it's a forgotten art. The genius of wind catchers lies in their deceptive simplicity. Picture a tall, hollow tower capped with vertical slats facing prevailing winds. As hot air rushes in, it's funneled downward through internal channels, often passing over water reservoirs or cool underground spaces called qanats. By the time the air exits into living spaces, it's dropped 20 or even 30 degrees. But here's the real magic: some designs work even when there's no wind. The tower's height creates a pressure differential, drawing warm indoor air upward and out, while cooler air seeps in from shaded courtyards below. It's a self-regulating system, silently balancing temperature and humidity like a natural thermostat. Modern engineers only recently grasped the full sophistication of these structures. Thermal imaging shows how wind catchers exploit microclimates, their orientation, height, and internal baffles tailored to local wind patterns. Some have adjustable dampers to control airflow, a feature now echoed in smart ventilation systems, and the materials sun-baked clay and straw bricks, whose porous nature absorbs daytime heat and releases it at night, smoothing temperature swings long before phase change materials entered architecture textbooks. The impact is staggering. In Yazd's Dawlatabad garden, a single 80-foot wind catcher cools an entire pavilion to comfortable levels even in peak summer. Nearby, ancient ice houses, yes, desert ice relied on wind catchers to freeze water overnight by radiating heat into the dry atmosphere, a feat that baffled European travelers for centuries. Compare that to modern AC units guzzling energy to fight nature rather than collaborate with it. Today, from Dubai's sustainable skyscrapers to Arizona's experimental eco-homes, architects are reviving this ancient tech. The Eastgate Center in Zimbabwe, modeled after termite mounds, nature's own wind catchers, uses passive ventilation to slash energy use by 90%. But perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in Yazd's old city, where families still sleep comfortably under 1,000-year-old wind catchers while neighboring modern buildings blast AC. The message is clear: sometimes the future isn't about inventing, it's about remembering. And that's the hidden beauty of these silent towers. They don't just cool air, they cool our feverish rush toward complexity. In an age of climate crisis, their wisdom whispers, the best solutions are often the simplest if we have the humility to learn from the past. High in the Andes, where thin air makes every breath labor and steep slopes defy conventional farming, the Incas performed an agricultural miracle. They sculpted mountains into fertile staircases. These terraces, called Andenes, transformed sheer cliffs into lush fields of potatoes, maize, and quinoa, supporting an empire of 12 million people at altitudes where modern farms struggle to survive. What's astounding isn't just their ambition, but their precision. These weren't mere flat steps hacked into hillsides. Each terrace was a meticulously engineered microclimate, with soil depths, drainage systems, and even stone walls calibrated to trap heat and block wind. Walk through Peru's Sacred Valley today, and you'll find these ancient farms still productive after 600 years, outperforming modern plowed fields in both yield and sustainability. The secret lies in their multi-layered genius. First, the stone retaining walls absorbed sunlight by day, radiating heat back into the soil at night to protect crops from frost and natural thermal battery. Then, underground channels diverted rainwater away during downpours but released it slowly during droughts, preventing both erosion and dehydration. But here's the real kicker. The Incas didn't just fight the terrain, they collaborated with it. By terracing slopes at different elevations, they created distinct growing zones. Lower tiers, warmer and sheltered, grew tropical fruit like passion flower. Higher up, cold-resistant tubers like oca thrived. It was vertical farming centuries before the term existed, a biodiversity hotspot engineered by hand. Modern agronomists are only now unraveling the full brilliance. The terrace wall's slight inward tilt prevented soil collapse during earthquakes critical in one of the world's most seismic regions. The soil itself was a custom blend, mixed with sand for drainage and llama manure for nutrients, a recipe still used by Quechua farmers today. Even the stair-step design had a hidden benefit. It slowed water runoff to a trickle, allowing sediment to deposit and continuously renew the soil. Compare that to modern industrial farms where topsoil vanishes at alarming rates. Yet the most revolutionary lesson isn't technical, it's philosophical. Where we see hostile landscapes to conquer, the Incas saw partners. Their terraces weren't imposed on the mountains, they conversed with them. Contemporary Andean farmers, descendants of the Inca, still speak of Pachamama, Earth Mother, when tending these plots, viewing agriculture as reciprocity, not extraction. It's a mindset yielding tangible results. Studies show terraced fields lose 90% less soil during heavy rains than conventional farms, while producing 3 times the crop diversity. Now, from Nepal's rice terraces to California's wildfire-prone hills, engineers are reviving these ancient practices. The UN promotes terracing as a climate resilience strategy, and high-tech startups are adapting Inca hydrology for drought zones. But perhaps the true legacy of Andenes isn't in their stones, but in their reminder. The most sustainable solutions often come not from reinventing nature, but from listening to it. The Incas didn't just feed an empire, they left a blueprint for farming in harmony with the land, one step at a time. For tens of thousands of years, indigenous Australians walked through the bush with fire in hand, not as destroyers, but as gardeners. This was firestick farming, an ancient land management system where carefully timed, low-intensity burns shaped entire ecosystems with surgical precision. Far from the catastrophic wildfires we fear today, these controlled fires moved slowly across the landscape like a gentle pruning, clearing underbrush while sparing mature trees, recycling nutrients into the soil, and triggering the germination of fire-adapted species. The result, a patchwork mosaic of vegetation at different growth stages, fire breaks created naturally, biodiversity boosted deliberately, and landscapes made resilient through intentional burning cycles passed down over generations. What seems counterintuitive, using fire to prevent fire, reveals profound ecological wisdom. Aboriginal clans knew exactly when and where to burn by reading subtle environmental cues, the flowering of certain plants, the behavior of animals, the moisture in the air. Cool burns conducted in the early dry season removed fuel loads before temperatures peaked, preventing the kind of devastating megafires that now ravage places like California and Australia itself. The proof lies in European colonists' own records. Early settlers marveled at the open, park-like forests they encountered, a far cry from the dense, fire-prone thickets that emerged when burning was banned. Modern science is finally catching up. Studies comparing traditionally managed lands with unburned areas show staggering differences. Firestick-farmed regions host up to twice as many plant and animal species, with healthier soils and higher carbon sequestration. The reason: those mosaic burns create edge habitats where different vegetation types meet, offering niches for diverse wildlife. Even more compelling satellite data reveals that when Aboriginal burning practices were abandoned in the 20th century, wildfire frequency and intensity skyrocketed. Now, from the Australian outback to the redwood forests of North America, land managers are relearning these ancient techniques. The U.S. Forest Service now trains firefighters in cultural burning, adopting indigenous methods to reduce catastrophic fire risk. In Arnhem Land, Aboriginal rangers combine traditional knowledge with drones and GPS mapping to restore fire regimes disrupted by colonization. There's poetic justice in watching Western science, after centuries of dismissing indigenous practices, urgently seeking out elders for their fire wisdom. But the true lesson of firestick farming isn't just about flames. It's about seeing humans not as separate from nature, but as active participants in its balance. Where modern conservation often tries to preserve landscapes by excluding people, Aboriginal philosophy recognizes that some ecosystems need human stewardship to thrive. Those carefully tended fires weren't just practical, they were sacred, woven into creation stories and kinship systems. Perhaps that's why this ancient technique endures. It doesn't just manage land, it honors a covenant between people and place. And in an era of climate crisis, that covenant might just be our most vital lifeline. Consider the sheer audacity of channeling a river across 30 miles of rugged terrain using nothing but gravity and stone. No pumps, no power, just pure engineering genius. That's the legacy of Roman aqueducts, structures so meticulously designed that some still quench the thirst of modern cities 2,000 years after their construction. Take the Aqua Virgo, completed in 19 BCE. Its subterranean tunnels and elegant arches snake through Rome, ending at the Trevi Fountain, where it continues to supply water to this day. But what made these systems revolutionary wasn't just their scale, it was their precision. Roman engineers calculated gradients down to the slightest incline, sometimes just a few centimeters per kilometer, to ensure water flowed smoothly without stagnating or eroding the channels. The secret to their longevity lay in the details. Aqueducts weren't just open troughs, they were shielded with waterproof mortar called opus signinum, a mix of lime and crushed pottery that prevented leaks. Maintenance shafts placed at regular intervals allowed workers to clear blockages, a feature still copied in modern sewer systems. And here's the kicker. The Romans even built settling tanks to filter out sediment before water reached cities, an early version of municipal water treatment. Their understanding of hygiene was so advanced that some aqueducts bypassed industrial areas entirely, ensuring clean drinking water wasn't contaminated by tanneries or workshops. Fast forward to today, and you'll find their influence everywhere. New York City's water tunnels mirror the Romans' gravity-fed design, while the inverted siphons they pioneered to move water across valleys now underpin hydroelectric projects. Even the iconic arches, originally used to span uneven terrain, became the blueprint for everything from railway viaducts to elevated highways. But perhaps the most telling tribute is how modern cities struggle to match their efficiency. The Aqua Claudia delivered over 200,000 cubic meters of water daily to Rome, enough to fill 80 Olympic pools with zero energy input. Compare that to today's pumping stations guzzling electricity to achieve the same feat. Yet the true marvel isn't just in the engineering, it's in the philosophy. Roman aqueducts were public works designed to benefit all citizens, from nobles to slaves. Fountains at street corners provided free water, while lavish baths offered hygiene and socialization. In an era when some cities still ration water, there's humbling wisdom in that egalitarian approach. The next time you turn on a tap, remember, you're not just using water, you're part of a tradition that began with stones stacked just so, by people who believed even the most basic human need deserved monumental care. Picture this: a scribe in ancient Thebes dipping a reed brush into ink made of soot and gum, carefully painting symbols onto a sheet of smooth, golden-hued papyrus, a sheet that could last not just decades but millennia. This wasn't just early paper, it was the Bitcoin of the ancient world. Papyrus, crafted from the pith of the Nile's towering reeds, became the backbone of civilizations, carrying everything from grocery lists to epic poetry, tax records to love letters. And here's the kicker: while most ancient writing materials crumbled to dust, Egyptian papyrus endured so well that we can still unroll scrolls from Pharaoh Ramses' era today. The process was deceptively simple, yet required artisan-level precision. Workers sliced the spongy core of papyrus stalks into thin strips, then laid them vertically and horizontally in 2 layers. When pounded together, the plant's natural starches fused the strips into a cohesive sheet under the Nile's blazing sun. But the real secret was in the details. Skilled makers alternated the direction of fibers for strength, polished surfaces with shells or ivory for smooth writing, and sometimes even soaked sheets in Nile water to activate binding saps, techniques modern papermakers have only recently started to replicate with high-tech equipment. What's wild is how versatile this primitive material proved. Papyrus wasn't just for scrolls. Egyptians fashioned it into sandals, boxes, even lightweight boats. The Greeks and Romans imported it as luxury stationery, with Cicero complaining about the high cost of fine, hieratica-grade sheets and its legacy. The word paper itself comes from papyrus, though true papyrus outlasts wood pulp paper by centuries. The Rylands Library in Manchester holds a papyrus fragment from 2500 BC, still flexible after 4,500 years, while your printer paper yellows in a decade. Today, a handful of artisans near Cairo's Nile marshes keep the craft alive using methods unchanged since Tutankhamun's time. At the Papyrus Institute in Luxor, you can watch workers split reeds with bronze knives just as their ancestors did, creating sheets that museums use to restore ancient texts. Modern scientists even study these new old scrolls to decode preservation mysteries, like how papyrus's alkaline pH and lack of lignin make it resistant to mold and insects. But perhaps papyrus' greatest gift was democratizing knowledge. Before it, writing was chiseled into stone or pressed into messy clay. Papyrus made record-keeping portable, affordable, and widespread. Imagine Cleopatra's laws, Euclid's geometry, and Sappho's poetry all traveled the ancient world on these fragile-seeming sheets. In our age of disappearing digital files and crumbling newsprint, that's a durability lesson worth unrolling. Imagine a thread so fine it shimmers like liquid moonlight, so strong it can outlast empires, and so coveted it sparked trade routes spanning continents. This is silk, China's ancient gift to the world, woven from the delicate jaws of a humble caterpillar. For over 5,000 years, the secret of sericulture remained locked within the Middle Kingdom, guarded as fiercely as any royal treasure. Yet the true marvel isn't just the exclusivity. It's that today, in an age of synthetic fibers and robotic looms, the exact same process perfected by Han Dynasty artisans still produces the most luxurious fabric known to humanity. It begins with the unlikeliest of alchemists, the Bomyx mori silkworm, a creature so domesticated it can no longer survive in the wild. Fed exclusively on fresh mulberry leaves, these caterpillars spin cocoons of a single unbroken filament up to 900 meters long, secreting a protein that hardens upon contact with air. Ancient Chinese farmers discovered that by carefully unwinding these cocoons in hot water, killing the pupae inside to prevent the filament from breaking, they could harvest threads finer than a human hair yet stronger, pound for pound, than steel. The magic unfolds in steps unchanged for millennia. After harvesting, filaments from several cocoons are twisted together into raw silk thread, then dyed using pigments from plants, minerals, or even crushed insects like cochineal beetles. But the real artistry begins at the loom. Traditional Chinese weavers developed techniques like kesi, or cut silk, creating intricate patterns by hand, shuttling colored threads so precisely that the finished tapestry appears painted. The famed Ding silks of the Tang dynasty, woven with gold-wrapped threads, still dazzle in museums today, their brilliance undimmed after 1,200 years. What's astonishing is how modern technology still bows to these ancient methods. Even with AI-assisted looms, the highest-grade silk, like that used for Hermes scarves or Savile Row ties, relies on hand reeling to preserve the fiber's natural luster and strength. Scientists have synthesized spider silk and engineered microfiber, yet nothing replicates the unique triangular prism structure of real silk that refracts light like a diamond. That's why surgeons still use it for sutures, and why your smartphone might secretly depend on it. Silkworm proteins are now used in biodegradable electronics. But silk's greatest legacy might be how it rewrote human history. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade route, it was the internet of antiquity, carrying ideas, religions, and innovations alongside bolts of fabric. When Byzantine monks smuggled silkworm eggs in hollow bamboo canes, breaking China's monopoly, it triggered an industrial espionage saga worthy of a spy thriller. Yet despite centuries of imitation, the finest silk still hails from Zhejiang and Sichuan provinces, where generational masters coax thread from cocoons with the same bamboo trays and wooden reels their ancestors used. In a world obsessed with faster, cheaper, disposable fashion, silk stands as a quiet rebuke. It takes 2,500 silkworms to make 1 pound of fabric. A single kimono might require 10,000 cocoons. This isn't just material, it's a covenant between humans and nature, demanding patience, reverence, and skill. The next time you slip on a silk blouse or tie a silk tie, remember, you're wearing 5 millennia of ingenuity, one miraculous thread at a time. Standing in the steep stone seats of Epidaurus, where even a whisper on stage carries clearly to the highest road 2,300 years after it was built, you can't help but feel the ghost of an ancient audio engineer grinning over your shoulder. This isn't just architecture, it's acoustic sorcery. The Greeks didn't just build theaters, they sculpted sound. Without decibel meters or computer models, they crafted amphitheaters where every syllable, every pluck of a lyre, every rustle of a costume traveled flawlessly to audiences of 14,000 people. The secret lies in a perfect storm of geometry, materials, and environmental intuition that modern acousticians are still reverse engineering today. Start with the shape. Unlike modern concert halls that box sound in, Greek theaters were open-air semicircles carved into hillsides. The steep 60-degree incline of the seating, far steeper than contemporary venues, created a natural sound funnel. Voices projected from the orchestra pit hit the stepped limestone rows at precise angles, reflecting upward rather than dissipating sideways. But here's the genius: the seats weren't just stairs. Each row was subtly contoured to act as an acoustic filter. The corrugated surface broke up sound waves, scattering bass frequencies that would muddy speech while preserving crisp highs. It's why actors didn't need to shout; ordinary conversation ping-ponged perfectly to the back rows. Then there's the stage itself. The scheme building behind performers wasn't merely decorative. Its wooden facade acted as a natural amplifier, while the circular orchestra floor's marble surface added just enough reverberation to enrich voices without echo. Modern simulations show that the placement of columns and stage structures created sound shadows that prevented overlapping reflections. even the audience played a role. Researchers at the University of Patras discovered that the porous limestone seats absorbed low-frequency crowd noise, while the human bodies themselves packed shoulder to shoulder damped excess reverberation like living acoustic panels. The real mic drop moment, Epidaurus wasn't unique. From Syracuse to Athens, Greek theaters shared these acoustic principles. In Taormina, Sicily, architects aligned the theater with Mount Etna's silhouette so evening performances would enjoy natural wind patterns that carried sound. Delphi's theater used the surrounding cliffs as a reflective backboard. This wasn't luck, it was a science so advanced that when the Romans copied Greek designs, their concrete-heavy versions often fell short. The difference: Greeks treated sound as a living element of the landscape, not something to brute force with volume. Today, from the Sydney Opera House to Broadway's newest theaters, designers still crib notes from Epidaurus. The Hollywood Bowl's concentric arches mimic Greek seating curves. Berlin's Pierre Boule's Sol uses algorithmic modeling to recreate those ancient reflection angles with millimeter precision. Even stadium engineers apply these principles. Notice how the best football arenas keep crowd noise vibrant without becoming incoherent echoes. But perhaps the most telling tribute is how modern attempts to improve Greek theaters often fail. When metal roofs were added to some ancient venues for weather protection, the acoustics suffered immediately. Turns out the ancients knew best. Sometimes the most sophisticated solution is letting sound dance freely with stone and sky. Stand in that silent theater at dawn before crowds arrive and clap once. The way the sharp report bounces back isn't just physics, it's a conversation across millennia. The Greeks didn't just master drama, they taught us that true amplification doesn't come from cranking up volume, but from listening, really listening, to how the world wants sound to move. And in an age of screeching speakers and muffled Zoom calls, that's a lesson worth hearing loud and clear. Picture a Lakota hunter on the Great Plains, slicing bison meat paper thin and hanging it to dry on wooden racks under the vast prairie sky. This wasn't just meal prep, it was survival science. Centuries before vacuum sealing and refrigerated trucks, Native Americans perfected the art of jerky, transforming perishable meat into lightweight, nutrient-dense fuel that could last for months or even years. What began as a necessity for nomadic tribes became a global snack phenomenon, proving that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most enduring. The process was deceptively simple but required intimate knowledge of environment and anatomy. Tribes like the Lakota and Navajo selected lean cuts, often bison, deer, or elk, trimming every trace of fat to prevent spoilage. Thin strips were then layered on racks high enough to catch the wind but low enough to avoid scavengers. In arid climates, sun and breeze did the work naturally. In humid regions, smoke from hardwood fires added preservation power while infusing rich flavor. But the real genius lay in the details. Salting the meat with minerals from desert lakes or rubbing it with crushed berries high in natural citric acid. Techniques that inhibited bacterial growth long before modern food scientists understood pH balance. Fast forward to today, and you'll find jerky's DNA in everything from gas station snacks to astronaut rations. The billion-dollar beef jerky industry still relies on those same principles of dehydration and salt curing, just with industrial fans replacing prairie winds. Yet modern producers are only now catching up to indigenous wisdom. Mass-market jerky often pumps in artificial preservatives, while traditional methods used natural antimicrobials like juniper, ash, or sumac. Survivalists and preppers have turned full circle, studying native techniques like pemmican, a blend of powdered jerky, rendered fat, and dried berries that fueled warriors and explorers with concentrated calories. What's often overlooked is jerky's role as an early form of food equity. Unlike European methods like salting or fermenting, which required heavy barrels and storage space, jerky was lightweight and portable. A single bison could yield hundreds of pounds of dried meat, easily carried by foot or horse. This democratized nutrition, allowing entire communities to thrive in harsh landscapes. The irony: today's boutique jerky brands market themselves as premium protein for athletes and hikers, when in reality, they're repackaging indigenous innovation with a hefty markup. Perhaps the most compelling testament to jerky's brilliance lies in modern emergencies. After Hurricane Katrina, FEMA included jerky in disaster relief kits for its shelf stability. NASA includes it in space missions because it withstands zero gravity without crumbling. Yet for all our technology, we still can't improve on the basic premise: remove moisture and food becomes immortal. The next time you tear into a bag of jerky, remember, you're not just snacking, you're tasting a 500-year-old survival hack, one that kept nations fed when the land offered no second chances. There's a reason we still say all roads lead to Rome, because 2,000 years later, many of them still do. Walk along the Appian Way, and your footsteps will trace the same stones that carried legionnaires, merchants, and emperors, a testament to engineering so precise that some stretches haven't needed major repairs since the days of Julius Caesar. What made these roads indestructible wasn't brute strength, but a meticulous layered system called via, a blueprint so effective that modern highways still follow its principles, just with asphalt instead of volcanic rock. The genius began underground. Roman engineers didn't just flatten dirt and call it a road, they excavated down several feet, creating a trench called the fossa. This wasn't just for stability, it was a drainage solution centuries ahead of its time. At the bottom, they laid the statumen, a foundation of large stones set in mortar to prevent shifting. Next came the rudus, a thick layer of crushed rubble mixed with hydraulic cement that acted like ancient concrete, flexing slightly under weight without cracking. Then the nucleus, finer gravel compacted to create a smooth surface, but the crowning touch, the summum dorsum, tightly fitted hexagonal paving stones so precisely interlocked that they formed an almost waterproof seal. What's wild is how these roads adapted to their environment. In marshy areas, builders drove oak piles deep into the ground like prehistoric pilings. In hilly regions, they carved steps into steep slopes or built retaining walls to prevent washouts. And the curves weren't arbitrary, roads gently cambered upward in the center, allowing rainwater to drain into gutters flanked by raised sidewalks. This wasn't just construction, it was hydrological engineering disguised as transportation. Modern road crews unknowingly echo these techniques daily. That blacktop highway you drove on today, its layers mirror the via system: a compacted sub-base, aggregate middle layer, and asphalt surface acting as the summum dorsum. Even the mix of modern concrete borrows from Roman recipes, swapping volcanic ash for fly ash to achieve similar durability. But here's the kicker: while our roads crumble after a decade or two, sections of the Appian Way still bear truck traffic. The difference: Romans built for the ages, not just the next fiscal year. Yet the true brilliance lay in standardization. The empire's roads weren't haphazard. They followed strict width guidelines, typically 12 Roman feet for main thoroughfares, allowing 2 chariots to pass comfortably. Distance markers, the ancestors of modern mileposts, counted every 1,000 paces. Mil passes, literally miles. Way stations with fresh horses dotted routes at regular intervals, a system echoed by today's highway rest stops. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a networked empire humming with efficiency. Perhaps the most humbling lesson lies beneath London streets, where the original Roman roads still dictate the city's layout. Or in the Alpine passes of Switzerland, where original Roman tunnels remain in use. We like to think of ourselves as pioneers of progress, but sometimes progress means realizing how little we've actually improved on the past. The next time you hit a pothole, remember, the solution might not lie in futuristic materials, but in rediscovering how an empire without diesel excavators built roads to outlast civilizations. Picture this: a double-hulled canoe no wider than a modern SUV, slicing through the midnight swells of the Pacific with nothing but the stars as a compass. No GPS, no sextant, not even a magnetic needle. For centuries, Polynesian voyagers undertook journeys spanning thousands of miles across open ocean, finding infinitesimal islands with nothing more than memorized star paths, the feel of waves beneath their hulls, and the flight patterns of seabirds. This wasn't just navigation, it was a celestial dance, a living science so precise it allowed humans to settle the planet's most remote archipelagos long before Europeans dared sail beyond sight of land. The brilliance of wayfinding, as it's called, lies in its multifaceted approach. Navigators like the legendary Maupiailg memorized a mental star compass dividing the horizon into 32 directional houses, each marked by a specific star's rising and setting points. But stars alone weren't enough. They read the ocean itself like a topographic map. Swell patterns refracting around distant islands created subtle interference in the waves, detectable only by leaning over the canoe's edge and feeling the water's pulse through their legs. Cloud formations hinted at land over the horizon. The greenish tint of certain clouds betrayed the reflection of lagoons. Even the behavior of marine life became clues. A sudden congregation of birds might signal nearby fish, which in turn suggested proximity to land. What's staggering is the scale of their achievements. The Polynesian Triangle, stretching from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island, encompasses 10 million square miles of ocean. Yet oral histories and DNA evidence show voyages between these islands were routine. In the 13th century, Tahitian navigators likely reached Rapa Nui, Easter Island, a speck of land just 14 miles wide after traversing 2,000 miles of open sea. Compare that to Columbus, who 5 centuries later relied on dead reckoning and stumbled upon the Americas while searching for India, the real tragedy. This knowledge nearly vanished. Colonization and modern technology eroded traditional navigation until the 1970s, when Hawaiian scholar Nainoa Thompson revived the art under master navigator Maupiailg. Their iconic voyage of the Hokulea, a replica Polynesian canoe that sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti using only ancient methods, proved the skeptics wrong. Today, NASA studies Polynesian techniques as a backup for interstellar navigation, recognizing that if our electronics fail among the stars, we might need to sail the cosmos as the Pacific Islanders once sailed their ocean. Modern deep-sea sailors trained in wayfinding describe it as a sensory awakening. Unlike Western navigation, which separates the navigator from the environment with instruments, Polynesian methods demand total immersion. You don't just look at the stars, you internalize their rhythms until they become a heartbeat. Swells aren't obstacles, they're storytellers whispering directions. It's a philosophy as much as a skill, one that sees humans not as conquerors of nature, but as its students, and perhaps that's why this ancient practice feels so urgent today. In an age of GPS satellites and autonomous ships, wayfinding reminds us that true mastery isn't about dominating the elements, it's about listening to them. The next time you glance at the night sky, try this. Find the star compass's cardinal points. East is where the sun rises, marked by the Pleiades in winter. West is where it sets, guarded by Orion's belt. Now imagine holding course for weeks, trusting only those lights and the sea's secret language. That's not just navigation. That's a conversation with the universe itself. Step into the hushed interior of Chartres Cathedral at dawn, when shafts of sunlight ignite the stained glass into a kaleidoscope of sapphire, ruby, and emerald colors so vivid they seem to pulse with inner light. These aren't just decorations, they're chemical symphonies composed in the Middle Ages, with recipes so precise that modern conservators still can't fully replicate some shades. The secret lies not in the glass itself, but in the powdered metals medieval artisans stirred into molten silica. Cobalt for that celestial blue, gold for ruby red, copper for forest green. Each hue was a calculated reaction between chemistry and craftsmanship, transforming sunlight into theology. What's astonishing is how these 12th century alchemists manipulated metals at the molecular level to produce that iconic chartreuse blue, a color so renowned it's named after the cathedral craftsman added cobalt oxide to the glass melt, then reheated it in a process called flashing to create a thin layer of concentrated color. The result, a transparency that filters light like a prism, scattering blue wavelengths while absorbing yellows and reds. Reds were even more finicky. Gold chloride, added in minuscule amounts, just 1 part per 10,000, produced a luminous crimson by forming nanoparticles that refract light, a phenomenon now called surface plasmon resonance, though medieval glaziers surely just called it magic. The real test of their genius, these colors defy time. Modern analysis shows the metal ions bond so thoroughly with the silica matrix that they resist fading even after 8 centuries of sunlight, acid rain, and wars. In fact, some original medieval paints outlast the modern replacements meant to restore them. When conservators at Canterbury Cathedral needed to repair damaged glass, they discovered contemporary glassmakers couldn't match the depth of ancient greens until they resurrected the exact copper oxide ratios found in original samples. Yet the brilliance goes beyond pigments. Medieval glaziers were masters of structural engineering too. Those intricate lead cames holding the glass weren't just frames. They acted as shock absorbers, allowing the massive windows to flex slightly in high winds without shattering. The thickness of each glass piece varied deliberately thinner at the top to compensate for gravity's pull on the lead, a nuance modern engineers only quantified with finite element analysis software. Today, from Paris' Sainte-Chapelle to New York's Cathedral of St. John the Divine, artisans still grind metal oxides by hand and blow glass into cylinders exactly as their predecessors did, because industrial methods can't replicate the organic variations that give ancient glass its luminosity. The Corning Museum of Glass hosts workshops where chemists and artists collaborate to decode medieval recipes, sometimes discovering unexpected additives like crushed bone for opacity or wine as a reducing agent. But perhaps the most profound lesson lies in how these windows functioned as narrative devices. The same cobalt that makes the Virgin Mary's robe shimmer also filtered harmful UV rays, preserving delicate interior frescoes. A blend of art and science modern museums strive to emulate with UV-blocking laminates. Next time you stand beneath a rose window, remember, you're not just seeing colored glass, you're witnessing a dialogue between medieval minds and sunlight, frozen in silica and metal, still glowing with secrets we've yet to fully unravel. Imagine a city larger than Rome at its peak, built on an island in the middle of a lake, where nearly every meal came from gardens that floated on water. This wasn't science fiction, it was Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, sustained by one of history's most ingenious agricultural systems, the Chinampas. These so-called floating gardens weren't actually buoyant. Instead, they were meticulously crafted rectangular plots of fertile soil, anchored to the lakebed by willow trees and separated by canals. Picture a grid of lush green islands stretching for miles, where farmers poled canoes between rows of corn, beans, squash, and flowers, their roots drinking directly from the mineral-rich water below. It was a closed-loop ecosystem that produced up to 7 harvests a year, enough to feed 200,000 people without synthetic fertilizers or diesel-powered tractors. The engineering behind Chinampas reveals a deep understanding of hydrology and microbiology. First, farmers wove reed mats into rectangular frames, then layered them with nutrient-dense mud dredged from the lake bottom. Willow trees planted along the edges acted as natural anchors, their roots knitting into underwater walls to prevent erosion, but the real magic happened beneath the surface. The canals between plots weren't just transportation routes, they functioned like liquid compost bins. Aquatic plants like duckweed absorbed excess nutrients, while fish and insects thrived, creating a balanced ecosystem that kept pests in check. At night, the water released stored heat, protecting crops from frost, a natural thermal regulation system modern greenhouses struggle to replicate. What's remarkable is how these 15th century techniques are staging a comeback. In Mexico City's Xochimilco district, a handful of Chinamperos still farm as their ancestors did, hand-harvesting spinach and cilantro from soil that's never needed chemical inputs. Meanwhile, urban farmers from Detroit to Bangkok are adapting the model, building raised beds in abandoned lots flooded with nutrient-enriched water. Researchers at the University of California found that Chinampa-style systems yield up to 4 times more per acre than conventional agriculture, with 90% less water waste. Even NASA has taken notice, studying Chinampas as a potential model for Martian agriculture where every drop of water and inch of space must be maximized. But the true lesson of Chinampas isn't just technical, it's philosophical. Where modern agriculture often fights nature with pesticides and monocrops, the Aztecs designed with nature. Their canals doubled as aquaculture, yielding protein-rich fish and edible insects. Flowers grown alongside food crops attracted pollinators while deterring pests. Waste became fertilizer and every element supported another. In an era of soil depletion and water scarcity, that harmony feels revolutionary. Now, as climate change strains global food systems, Chinampas offer more than nostalgia, they're a blueprint. Projects like London's floating food forest and Singapore's rooftop aquaponics farms prove that ancient wisdom can thrive in concrete jungles. The next time you bite into a salad, consider this. The future of farming might not lie in towering vertical factories, but in reclaiming the simple brilliance of an empire that fed millions by turning lakes into gardens. High in the Himalayas, where the air thins and the light takes on an almost liquid clarity, monks kneel before stretched cotton canvases with brushes finer than a single hair. This is Thangka painting not merely art, but a sacred geometry of devotion, where every stroke follows rituals unchanged since the 7th century. These intricate scrolls, bursting with jewel-toned deities and mandalas, aren't decorations. They're meditation tools, maps to enlightenment painted with pigments ground from lapis lazuli, malachite, and even crushed gold. What's astonishing isn't just their beauty, but that each Thangka is a living archive of chemistry and spirituality, where the minerals themselves are believed to hold transformative power. The process begins with a canvas hand-woven cotton stretched taut over a wooden frame and primed with a glue made from yak hide and limestone. This isn't just practical, it's symbolic. The animal, mineral, and plant elements represent the interconnectedness of all things. Then comes the grid. Using strings dipped in red pigment, masters snap precise lines to map out the divine proportions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, a system of sacred ratios passed down through oral tradition. No pencil sketches, no erasures. Every mark is permanent, a reflection of the Buddhist principle of mindful action, but the true alchemy lies in the pigments. In a world of synthetic colors, Thangka painters still pulverize semi-precious stones in stone mortars, just as their ancestors did. Lapis lazuli from Afghanistan yields that iconic celestial blue, symbolizing wisdom. Cinnabar from Chinese mines provides the vermilion of compassion, while powdered coral represents the life force. Even the gold isn't merely gilded, it's painstakingly applied with a damp brush, one molecule thin layer at a time, until the surface emits its own light. Modern spectrographs have analyzed these paintings, revealing traces of herbs and honey mixed into the pigments, natural preservatives that defy oxidation. A 17th century Thangka in Lhsa's Jokhang Temple still glows as if painted yesterday. What's often overlooked is how these paintings function as spiritual technology. The act of creation is itself meditation. Monks might spend years on a single piece, their focus as steady as the mountain winds outside. The pigment's vibrations are said to align with specific chakras. Gazing at a green Tara Thangka, for instance, is believed to activate the heart center. Western conservators initially dismissed this as mysticism until they noticed something peculiar. Thankas stored in temples where rituals are performed show far less deterioration than identical works in secular museums. Some now theorize the mantras chanted during painting might subtly alter the material's crystalline structure, an idea that bridges quantum physics and faith. Today, from Dharamshala's refugee workshops to Manhattan galleries, Thanka's legacy endures. Contemporary artists still grind their own malachite, still use squirrel hair brushes, still begin each session with prayers. The difference: now scientists study these paintings to develop new light-fast pigments, while neuroscientists examine how their symmetrical designs trigger gamma waves in meditators' brains. Yet for all our analysis, there's magic that resists explanation. The way a master's Thanka of the medicine Buddha, painted with real lapis and gold, seems to pulse with presence. Maybe that's the real secret hidden in these mineral layers. Some truths aren't meant to be decoded, only witnessed. And in a world hungry for quick digital fixes, that's a revelation worth sitting with brush in hand, breath steady, eyes wide open. Run your fingers along the intricate swirls of a Celtic talk or trace the interlaced patterns in the Book of Kells, and you'll touch more than just art. You'll touch a language without words. Celtic knotwork, with its endless loops and seemingly infinite paths, wasn't just decoration. It was a visual hymn to interconnectedness, a mathematical marvel woven into metal, parchment, and stone. What looks at first glance like ornate flourishes hides a code, one that survived over 1,500 years, leaping from Iron Age weapon hilts to modern tattoo parlors and smartphone wallpapers. The genius of these knots lies in their deliberate imperfection. Unlike the rigid symmetry of Roman mosaics or Greek meanders, Celtic designs often include intentional breaks in the pattern, a single line cleverly hidden where the knot appears to continue uninterrupted. This wasn't a mistake, it reflected the Celtic worldview. Life wasn't seen as a perfect cycle but as an ever-evolving journey. The interlacing strands symbolized the weave of fate, where choices, those visual gaps, could redirect destinies without breaking the greater tapestry. Scholars speculate some patterns even mapped constellations or lunar cycles, turning jewelry and crosses into portable astronomical charts. Modern mathematicians have reverse-engineered these knots only to hit a wall. The Book of Durrow's carpet pages contain designs so complex they require algorithmic modeling to replicate accurately, yet 7th century monks crafted them freehand with quills. The famous Trinity knot, now stamped on everything from wedding bands to corporate logos, follows a construction method called under-over sequence that wasn't formally documented in the West until Renaissance-era draftsmanship. How did Iron Age metalworkers execute these patterns without graph paper or compasses? The answer might lie in oral traditions passed down through generations of smiths, treating geometry as sacred knowledge. What's fascinating is how knotwork evolved across materials. Early examples on bronze shields used raised ridges to create shadows that emphasized the weave, while illuminated manuscripts like the Lindisfarne Gospels employed vibrant pigments: red for passion, green for nature, gold for divinity. Even the knot's density carried meaning. Sparse, open designs often adorned everyday objects, signaling hospitality, while densely packed patterns on reliquaries or high crosses represented the unfathomable complexity of the divine. Today, from Dublin's jewelry workshops to Hollywood's Viking epics, Celtic knots have become shorthand for ancient wisdom, yet most wearers miss the layers hidden in those loops. The sailor's knot, popular in wedding bands, originally symbolized the interwoven lives of fishermen and the sea. The spiral of life, now a tattoo favorite, wasn't just about eternity. Its clockwise coils represented the sun's journey, while counterclockwise spirals mirrored the other world. Even the Dara knot, marketed as a Celtic tree of life, likely originates from an older motif mimicking oak root systems, embodying resilience in turbulent times. But here's the twist. Contemporary neuroscientists are discovering why these patterns feel so hypnotic. Functional MRI scans show that viewing interlaced designs activates both the analytical left brain, tracing the paths, and the creative right brain, appreciating the flow, inducing a mild meditative state. No wonder medieval scribes surrounded sacred texts with knotwork. It literally prepared the mind for contemplation. Perhaps that's why this art form endures. In a digital age of disposable imagery, the patience required to craft, or even fully see, a true Celtic knot forces us to slow down, to follow a single strand from start to, well, there is no end. Just like the beliefs they encode, these loops invite us to get lost in order to find ourselves. And that's a design no algorithm can replicate. The rich, molasses-thick aroma of coffee slowly simmering in a small copper pot is more than just a morning ritual. It's a centuries-old sensory experience perfected by the Ottomans. This brewing method, using a long-handled sieve and finely ground coffee boiled in water and often sugar, isn't just a way to make a drink. It's a ceremony, a social institution, and an UNESCO-recognized piece of intangible cultural heritage. What began in the royal kitchens of Topkapi Palace spread through bazaars, diplomatic circles, and eventually the world, creating a legacy as enduring as the grounds left at the bottom of the cup. The magic starts with the sieve itself, a deceptively simple vessel with a shape refined over generations. The narrow neck slows evaporation, concentrating flavors, while the copper conducts heat evenly, preventing scorching. Unlike modern espresso machines that force water through beans under pressure, the Ottoman method coaxes flavors out through patience. Finely ground coffee, almost powdery in texture, is mixed with cold water and sometimes a pinch of cardamom and brought to a near boil 3 times, each rise of foam carefully skimmed or stirred back in to layer the brew with complexity. That foam, called kaymak, isn't just aesthetic. It's a sign of mastery, proof the coffee was brewed slowly enough to emulsify oils without boiling away the essence. This ritual wasn't just about taste, it was a social contract. By the 16th century, Istanbul's coffee houses became hubs of intellectual exchange, so influential that sultans periodically banned them, fearing political dissent. Yet the practice persisted, intertwined with hospitality. Serving coffee became a gesture of respect, the cup's richness reflecting the host's esteem. Fortune-telling from the leftover grounds, tasseography added mystique, turning each serving into both a beverage and a conversation with fate. Modern science reveals why this ancient technique endures. The slow extraction pulls fewer bitter tannins than rapid brewing, while the suspended microgrounds create a velvety mouthfeel no paper filter can replicate. Even the sugar, when added during brewing, not after, caramelizes subtly, rounding out the flavor. UNESCO didn't just preserve a drink, it honored a philosophy that some things can't be rushed. Today, from Brooklyn to Beirut, third-wave cafes tout Turkish coffee, made with electric kettles, but purists know the difference. The true art lives on in Istanbul's grand bazaars, where masters still brew over hot sand for precise heat control, and in Bosnian homes where coffee is served with a square of lokum as a peace offering. In an era of instant gratification, the sieve reminds us that the best flavors and conversations simmer slowly. Consider the striking sight of a Maori elder with intricate patterns spiraling across their face, each curve and line not just decoration but a living genealogy. This is Tomoko, the ancient art of chiseled facial tattoos, where every mark tells a story of ancestry, status, and personal journey. Unlike generic tattoos, these designs are waka-papa physical manifestations of lineage, hammered into the skin with bone chisels and pigment in a sacred ritual that binds the wearer to their people and land. What was nearly erased by colonial forces has surged back as a defiant reclamation of indigenous identity, proving that some traditions can't be silenced, only revived. The process itself is a testament to endurance. Traditional Tomoko isn't merely inked, It's carved using U-high chisels made from albatross bone or metal, tapping the design into the skin like a woodcarver etching sacred meeting house panels. The pain isn't incidental, it's purposeful, a rite of passage that mirrors the struggles of ancestors. Pigments, often blended from burnt Kori gum or vegetable matter, carry the hues of the earth, embedding the Wenua land literally into the body. Designs aren't chosen from a catalogue, they're crafted through deep consultation with Tohunga experts who read the wearer's bone structure, life experiences, and tribal affiliations to create patterns as unique as fingerprints. What's often misunderstood is the language of these markings. A koru spiral on the cheek might symbolize new beginnings, echoing an unfurling fern frond. Parallel lines along the jaw could denote warrior status, while delicate curves near the brow might trace migratory paths of ancestral waka canoes. Women's moko koi, chin tattoos traditionally signaled roles as knowledge keepers, their designs flowing like waterways to represent the lifeblood of oral traditions. This isn't body art, it's a visual dialect, one that colonizers tried to erase by banning the practice in the 19th century, forcing many to hide their moko or risk persecution. Yet here's the resurgence. Today, Maori lawyers, artists, and activists wear tā moko as both personal heritage and political statement. When New Zealand politician Nanaia Mahuta wore her moko koi in Parliament in 2016, it wasn't just personal. It was a watershed moment, normalizing Indigenous identity in spaces that once excluded it. Contemporary Tohunga blend ancient methods with modern hygiene, using sterilized tools while preserving the ritual's spiritual core. Even the pain remains intentional, a thread connecting generations. Scientists now study something unexpected: the acoustics of the tā moko chisel. The rhythmic tapping frequency, researchers suggest, may induce a trance-like state, helping recipients transcend pain, an ancient biohack aligning with modern studies on sound therapy. Meanwhile, tattoo artists worldwide now study Maori designs not to copy, but to understand the ethics of culturally significant ink, sparking conversations about appropriation vs. appreciation. But perhaps the most profound power of tā moko lies in its irrepressibility. In Wellington's urban studios and remote Maori meeting grounds, the sound of chisels continues, each strike a rebellion against erasure. These marks don't fade, they amplify voices written in skin declaring, "We are still here." And in that persistence, an 800-year-old practice becomes the ultimate act of future-making. Picture this, a sun-baked hillside in Athens where 5,000 citizens gather not to watch a play or cheer athletes, but to vote directly on laws by dropping pebbles into urns. This wasn't just governance, it was the world's first large-scale experiment in democracy, a radical idea that placed power directly in the hands of ordinary citizens 2,500 years before modern ballot boxes. The Athenian system wasn't perfect. Women, enslaved people, and foreigners were excluded, but its core innovations still echo in today's elections, from jury selection to heated town hall debates. The heart of Athenian democracy pulsed in the assembly, where free male citizens over 18 could speak and vote on everything from war declarations to street repairs. Unlike modern representative systems, this was direct democracy in its rawest form. No senators or parliamentarians as middlemen. Citizens served on juries of 500 or more, ensuring no single judge could monopolize justice. They used a clever randomization device called a kleroterion, a stone slab with slots that assigned jurors to courts using colored ballots, an ancient forerunner to today's randomized jury pools. Even ostracism, the process of exiling overly powerful leaders, was decided by popular vote using broken pottery shards called ostroka, proving that cancel culture is far from a modern invention. Fast forward to today and the connections are startling. The filibuster in the U.S. Senate traces back to Athenian orators who could speak endlessly to delay votes unless outshouted by opponents. Modern ballot designs still follow principles laid out in Aristotle's Constitution of the Athenians, emphasizing clarity and accessibility. Even our concept of political accountability stems from the Athenian euthena, a rigorous public audit all officials faced after their terms, exposing corruption with ruthless transparency. But perhaps the most enduring legacy is the agora, that bustling marketplace of ideas where citizens debated everything from taxes to naval strategy. These weren't scripted press conferences, but raucous, unscripted clashes of logic and rhetoric. Philosophers like Socrates sharpened their arguments here, teaching us that democracy thrives not just on votes, but on the quality of public discourse. In an age of social media bubbles and soundbite politics, that lesson feels more urgent than ever. Now watch a modern courtroom and you'll see Athenian fingerprints everywhere. The presumption of innocence, first codified in Athenian trials, the right to face accusers, standard practice in the dicasteria courts, even the 6-hour time limit on speeches set by water clocks finds its echo in today's congressional debate timers. The difference: Athenian jurors voted immediately after hearing arguments, avoiding the media spin cycles that distort modern justice. Yet for all its brilliance, Athenian democracy carried warnings we've yet to fully heed. Their system collapsed partly because wealthy elites learned to game the courts and assemblies, a cautionary tale for our era of lobbying and dark money. And their exclusion of women and non-citizens reminds us that democracy is always a work in progress, not a finished product. The real gift of those ancient Greeks wasn't a perfect system, but a revolutionary question. What if ordinary people, not kings or oligarchs, could steer society? 25 centuries later, as voter apathy and polarization threaten democracies worldwide, that question still demands an answer. Maybe the pebbles they dropped into urns were more than votes. They were the first ripples in a conversation about power that we're still learning to have. Deep in the dry heat of an Egyptian embalmer's workshop, a body lies submerged in natron salt, not to punish, but to preserve. This was mummification, a 70-day alchemy of chemistry and spirituality that turned perishable flesh into a vessel for eternity. Far from the Hollywood cliché of crude linen-wrapped corpses, the process was a sophisticated blend of biology and belief, with steps so precise they've influenced modern forensics and museum conservation techniques. The embalmers began by understanding human anatomy in ways that wouldn't be matched until the Renaissance. Through a small incision near the abdomen, they removed organs with hooks and spatulas, carefully avoiding damage to the ribcage, a technique later refined into modern autopsy procedures. But here's the twist: they knew which organs to keep and which to discard. The brain, considered unimportant, was liquefied and extracted through the nose, while the heart remained, believed to be the seat of intelligence and morality. The liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines were preserved separately in canopic jars, each protected by a different deity. This wasn't just superstition, it reflected an advanced grasp of organ function and decomposition rates. Natron salt, the real hero of mummification, wasn't merely for drying. This naturally occurring blend of sodium carbonate and bicarbonate created a hypertonic environment, drawing moisture from tissues while inhibiting bacterial growth, principles now used in preserving biological specimens. Modern taxidermists still employ similar desiccants, and forensic pathologists study mummies to understand long-term tissue preservation in cold cases. Even the embalming oils concocted from cedar, myrrh, and palm wine contained compounds with antifungal and antibacterial properties that science has only recently identified as effective preservatives. What's often overlooked is the embalmer's mastery of material science. Resins applied to the skin formed a flexible, waterproof barrier, a precursor to today's synthetic polymers used in artifact conservation. When archaeologists unsealed Tutankhamun's tomb in the 1920s, they found his floral collars still vibrant after 33 centuries, testament to resins that prevented oxidation. The Getty Museum now uses similar plant-based resins to protect ancient painted artifacts, proving that sometimes the old ways are still the gold standard. But the most striking legacy lies in modern forensic anthropology. By studying mummies, scientists have reconstructed ancient diets, identified genetic diseases, and even traced migrations through isotopic analysis of teeth and bones. When researchers CT scanned Ramses Roman III, they detected a throat wound hidden beneath bandages, evidence of a royal assassination attempt missed by earlier examinations. This cross-disciplinary approach, blending archaeology and criminal investigation, birthed the field of paleopathology. Yet beyond the science, Egyptian embalming offers a poignant lesson about humanity's relationship with mortality. Their meticulous care, stuffing nostrils with peppercorns to maintain shape, positioning hands in gestures of prayer, reveals a culture that saw death not as an end but as a transition. Today, as we digitize memories and cryogenically freeze bodies, we're still chasing their fundamental idea that some things are too precious to let fade. The next time you see a mummy in a museum, remember, you're not just looking at a preserved body, you're witnessing the origins of our eternal struggle to outwit time itself. Centuries before GPS satellites orbited the Earth, Chinese navigators held a small wooden bowl containing what seemed like magic, a spoon-shaped lodestone that always pointed south. This was the Sinan, the world's first compass, born not for travel but for harmony. Originally designed during the Han Dynasty around 200 BC for Feng Shui alignment and divination, this humble tool would revolutionize humanity's relationship with the planet in ways its creators could never have imagined. The compass's journey from mystical artifact to navigational necessity began with the peculiar properties of magnetite, a naturally magnetic mineral the Chinese called the loving stone. Diviners noticed that when carved into a ladle shape and placed on a polished bronze plate, the lodestone's handle consistently aligned with the Earth's magnetic field. Early Taoist masters used these devices to balance architecture with cosmic forces, ensuring homes and temples resonated with the natural order. But by the 9th century Tang dynasty, maritime traders had repurposed the technology, floating magnetized needles in bowls of water to maintain course during treacherous ocean voyages. What's extraordinary is how quickly this innovation spread. Arab merchants adopted the fish that points the way by the 11th century, passing it to European navigators who misinterpreted its Chinese origins as a gift from God. Suddenly, ships could venture beyond sight of land regardless of weather, leading to the age of exploration. Columbus, Magellan, and Zheng He all relied on compasses descended from that original lodestone spoon. The magnetic needle didn't just guide ships, it rewrote global trade routes, sparked colonial empires, and connected civilizations that had evolved in isolation for millennia. Modern engineers still marvel at the compass's elegant simplicity. Unlike today's digital devices requiring power and satellites, a basic magnetic compass needs nothing but the Earth's own invisible forces. Pilots train with them as emergency backups when electronics fail, and hikers swear by their reliability where smartphone signals vanish. The latest quantum compasses being developed for submarines and spacecraft. They're essentially ultra-precise versions of the same principle, measuring magnetic fields at atomic levels, yet the compass's greatest legacy might be philosophical. Before its invention, most cultures viewed the world through local landmarks, rivers, mountains, stars. The compass introduced the radical idea of absolute direction, a universal framework transcending place and culture. It taught humanity to think globally centuries before the first world maps. Next time your phone's GPS guides you home, remember, you're using the digital descendant of a Taoist divination tool, proof that even our oldest discoveries still point the way forward. Standing before a Viking runestone, you're not just looking at weathered carvings, you're staring into a frozen moment of history where grief, pride, and legacy collide in chiseled symbols. These towering monuments, scattered across Scandinavia like silent sentinels, were far more than grave markers. They were the social media feeds of their era, carefully curated announcements meant to endure centuries. Imagine a bereaved family commissioning a rune master to etch their sorrow into granite. Gunnar raised this stone for Arnfast, his brother, who died bravely in the east. With those few runes, they transformed raw emotion into eternal memory, proving that even Vikings feared being forgotten. The real magic of runestones lies in their layered storytelling. On the surface, they declare facts: who died, who mourned them, sometimes even how they perished. But peer closer, and you'll catch whispers of entire worldviews. The Jelling stones in Denmark, commissioned by King Harald Bluetooth in the 10th century, don't just honor his parents. They boast of unifying Denmark and Norway while subtly announcing his conversion to Christianity, a political billboard carved in stone. The Rök runestone in Sweden takes it further, cramming over 700 runes with cryptic poetry, historical references, and even what some scholars believe is a coded warning about climate change after a volcanic winter. Modern linguists treat these stones as linguistic time capsules. The runic alphabet, or Futhark, evolved across centuries, and each carving captures dialect snapshots like phonetic fossils. By comparing spelling variations across regions, how one stone writes sun as Sunu, while another uses Sunna, researchers map the branching tree of Old Norse into dialects that would become Swedish, Danish, and Norwegian. Even grammatical mistakes are treasures. A misspelled verb might reveal how everyday speech diverged from formal writing, much like how our texts differ from Shakespearean English. But runestones weren't just for the dead. Some served as legal documents, like Norway's dinner stone, which records an inheritance dispute. Others were glorified travel blogs. The Greece runestones detail Viking expeditions to Constantinople, while the Ingvar stones memorialize a disastrous Caspian sea voyage. There's even what archaeologists call ghost runestones, where blank spaces suggest the deceased's name was added later and never was. These haunting blanks hint at lives lost at sea, their bodies and legacies swallowed by the waves. Today, laser scanning and reflectance transformation imaging RTI peel back layers of erosion to recover vanished runes. In 2015, researchers discovered a 9th century stone in Sweden that flipped the timeline of Viking expansion, proving raids began decades earlier than written histories claimed. Other stones, long dismissed as fake because their runes didn't match standard Old Norse, are now recognized as legitimate regional dialects, rewriting the linguistic map of medieval Scandinavia. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in how these stones bridge pagan and Christian worlds. Early runestones invoked Thor's hammer for protection. Later ones bore cross symbols but kept the old poetic cadence, like the Karlevi stone, which blends Norse kennings, storm of the war god, for battle with a Christian prayer. They remind us that cultural shifts aren't clean breaks, but slow braids of tradition and change. So the next time you see a runestone in a museum, don't just skim the translation. Imagine the hands that carved it, the voices that wept beside it, and the centuries of rain and snow that failed to wash its story away. In an age of digital files that vanish with a power outage, there's power in words that outlast empires, written not in ink but in stone and stubborn memory. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where the canopy blocks all but slivered sunlight, a Waorani hunter dips a palm spine into a sticky black paste, carefully coating its tip before loading it into a 3-meter-long blowgun. This isn't just a weapon, it's a masterpiece of biochemical engineering. The paste, known as curare, has been used for centuries to bring down monkeys and birds with astonishing efficiency, paralyzing them mid-flight without poisoning the meat. But what makes this ancient hunting technique revolutionary isn't its lethal precision. It's how modern medicine hijacked its chemistry to save lives in operating rooms worldwide. The secret lies in the complex brew's ingredients. Tribes like the Waorani and Yanomami harvest vines like Chondrodendron tomentosum and Strychnos toxifera, boiling them down with snake venom, ant secretions, and other botanicals in rituals passed down through generations. The result, a cocktail of alkaloids that block acetylcholine receptors at neuromuscular junctions, silencing nerve signals to muscles within minutes. A monkey hit with a Cuirair dart doesn't drop from toxicity. It simply stops breathing as every voluntary muscle locks in place, leaving the heart and brain untouched. When European explorers first witnessed this in the 18th century, they dismissed it as savage sorcery. Then scientists isolated the active compound D-tubercularine in the 1940s and everything changed. Surgeons realized that in controlled doses, this poison could revolutionize anesthesia by providing temporary muscle relaxation during operations. Before Cuirair, patients undergoing abdominal surgery required deep, dangerous levels of general anesthesia to prevent involuntary movements. Now, with synthetic derivatives like pancuronium and rocuronium derived from the original Amazonian formula, surgeons can work with precision while patients remain lightly sedated. The irony is palpable. A substance honed to kill now saves countless lives daily. Modern variants of Cuirair's alkaloids are staples in emergency intubation, preventing traumatic muscle contractions during ventilator placement. They're indispensable in eye surgery, where even a flinch could mean blindness. Even the development of modern Roman IV anesthesia owes a debt to these dart poisons. Without them, we might never have mastered balanced anesthesia techniques that pair muscle relaxants with pain control. Yet for all our pharmaceutical advancements, the original recipe remains a closely guarded tribal secret. Ethnobotanists still trek into the Amazon to learn from shamans, documenting subtle variations in Cuirair blends between villages. Some formulations include ingredients that potentiate the alkaloid's effects, a sophistication Western chemists only recently began replicating with synthetic enhancers. When researchers analyzed a Yanomami brew in 2019, they discovered previously unclassified compounds that could inspire new generations of neuromuscular drugs. But the true lesson of Cuirair isn't just about molecular mimicry. It's about reciprocity. Tribes who shared their knowledge with scientists often received little in return, watching pharmaceutical companies profit from ancestral wisdom while their forests were bulldozed. Today, ethical researchers work with indigenous communities through benefit-sharing agreements, ensuring drug royalties fund healthcare and land conservation. The Waorani now use GPS mapping to document their medicinal plants, creating a biocultural archive that doubles as legal defense against deforestation. So the next time a surgeon administers a muscle relaxant, remember, it carries echoes of a hunter crouched in the emerald gloom, patiently stalking prey. From poison dart to life-saving drug, Cuirair's journey reminds us that the line between toxin and treatment is often just a matter of dosage and respect for the hands that first mixed it. From the self-healing concrete of Rome to the celestial navigation of Polynesian voyagers, these 30 ancient techniques reveal something startling. Our ancestors weren't just surviving, they were innovating with a brilliance that still shapes our world. Think about it, the same acupuncture needles relieving back pain in Manhattan clinics today were mapped out 3,000 years ago by healers who'd never seen an X-ray. The chocolate you savor carries the exact fermentation secrets Mayan farmers discovered by observing tropical microbes. Even the roads beneath your tires follow engineering principles laid down by Roman surveyors 2 millennia before asphalt existed. What makes these traditions endure isn't nostalgia, it's their ruthless efficiency. The Incas' earthquake-resistant terraces out-yield modern farms in the Andes. Byzantine fire weapons inspired today's incendiary technology, and that herbal remedy in your cabinet, its formula might trace back to an Egyptian papyrus or an Ayurvedic sage trial and error experiments. These weren't lucky guesses, they were hard-won solutions refined over generations, blending observation, creativity, and a deep dialogue with nature. Here's the real challenge. These 30 examples are just the beginning. Look around. Those cobblestones in old town squares, they're laid using the same staggered patterns Roman builders devised to distribute weight. The fermentation techniques behind your favorite cheese or beer, they're descendants of Neolithic preservation methods. Even the wind catchers cooling buildings in Iran today could revolutionize sustainable architecture as climate change escalates. History isn't a museum, it's a living workshop, and we're surrounded by its blueprints. So the next time you stir honey into your tea, remember, you're using a natural preservative so potent it's edible after millennia in Egyptian tombs. When you admire a Gothic cathedral's stained glass, think of the medieval alchemists who turned metal oxides into eternal light. These threads connect us to countless unnamed inventors: the woman who first fermented soybeans into miso, the smith who alloyed bronze, the navigator who trusted star paths over safe harbors. Their legacy isn't frozen in time, it's evolving through us. If this glimpse into humanity's collective genius has you spotting ancient innovations everywhere, from your sushi's nori wrap, a 9th century Japanese preservation method, to the corkscrew in your drawer based on Archimedes' screw, then you're seeing the world as it truly is, a palimpsest of solutions waiting to be rediscovered. Want to uncover more? Subscribe and join us as we keep unearthing history's hidden operating manual, one ingenious idea at a time, because the past isn't just behind us. It's the foundation underfoot, the tools in our hands, and the untapped potential whispering, what if we remembered more?